Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you common sense patriots to this episode of Common Sense for America. We're speaking to you tonight from Christian's Tailgate in the Heights of Houston, Texas. Tonight, we're going to comment on the presidential debate. We're going to discuss the issues that each candidate presented, the demeanor of the candidates, how you and we might reflect on the issues that they presented, on their solutions for the nation's problems. First and foremost, let's take up the issue of how the candidates looked. I have to say, President Biden looked frail. At sometimes he looked a little bit like a deer in the headlights. At sometimes he looked confused. In contrast, former President Trump looked much stronger, more vibrant, more robust, and he looked more capable of making it through the first 4 years of the presidency. Both candidates will be what we call a lame duck as to Congress and getting their agendas done. Both candidates will therefore be very anxious to pursue their agendas very aggressively during the first 2 years of their term and less aggressively in the second 2 years, when they will be more concerned about their legacy, more concerned about helping their party win the next election. I think the vibrancy of the president in question is a very, very important issue, and there was a sharp contrast between the two. And that may be the single most defining difference between the candidates tonight. Now, the candidates also had a fairly significant debate over Social Security. President Biden wants to dramatically increase taxes on the rich in order to bring more money into the Social Security Trust Fund. Former President Trump really didn't have an answer as to how he would deal with the Social Security crisis. And if something isn't done, Social Security is expected to be bankrupt and have to start cutting benefits by 2035. Something must be done. Now, several congressional committees have studied this problem, and they have recommended several things that can be done. Now, let's talk about what those committees have recommended and question why neither candidate mentions any of these issues. Number one, slowly increase the retirement age to receive Social Security to 70 and potentially 71 or 72. Do this very, very slowly so that it is impacting only the very young who would be entering the Social Security system. Second, stop allowing people who are not citizens to receive Social Security benefits. Now, we wouldn't cut anybody off who's receiving benefits now, but we might say if you are not a citizen of the United States, you're working in the United States, you're paying taxes into the Social Security system, you will not receive benefits when you finally do retire. You will not receive benefits unless and until you become a citizen of the United States. 3, the United States invests the Social Security Trust Fund in treasury bills, treasury bonds. These earn a very, very low rate of return. Now, the return's a little higher now that interest rates are up, but it's dramatically below that which we could get in the commercial markets if professionally managed. We should hire a panel of professional management firms, money management firms, give them a piece of the Social Security Trust Fund, have them invest that, and allow them to earn a portion of the returns on that investment above a threshold that we set. And instead of being satisfied with a 2% return to the trust fund, we would set a minimum return of like 6% or more. We could triple, possibly even quadruple the revenue from the Social Security Trust Fund by doing that one thing. We've also talked about a means testing payments for Social Security, such that people who are very wealthy don't get the same benefits as the middle class and the poor. They would get less benefits, or maybe no benefits at all. This is a fourth thing that has been considered. I personally find that distasteful, but it's a fourth thing that Congress has recommended we look at. Congress never recommended increasing Social Security taxes on the very wealthy United States citizens. They never recommended that, and yet that was Biden's solution. Former President Trump really didn't have a decent solution in the commentary tonight, and I fault him for that. Both candidates were pressed on the huge increase in the deficits that occurred during their administrations. Former President Trump increased the deficit, the national debt, dramatically in response to the COVID crisis. He did not defend himself well in explaining that that was the primary cause of the deficits during his administration. Biden attacked him on that, and Biden was accurate in saying that the national debt went up more during the Trump administration than it has during the Biden administration. Today, we have a deficit of about $35 trillion, an annual budget this year of around $7.3 trillion, and we're running a $2 trillion deficit this year on that $7.3 trillion budget. Neither candidate did a good job of dealing with the issue of deficits. Neither candidate even talked about the existential threat that the huge debt poses for our nation. I was disappointed in both candidates that they did not deal with this. Neither candidate dealt with our military needs at all. And we've had several members of Congress from both sides of the aisle talk about how our military budget needs to be increased and our military made more robust in response to challenges and threats from China, challenges and threats from Iran and their proxies, challenges and threats from Russia, challenges and threats from North Korea. Neither candidate even discussed this. They talked about the deficits, and they talked about the amount of debt, but they didn't talk about it in relationship to our national defense issues. Abortion was one of the most controversial issues that they discussed tonight. President Biden accused Trump of not being willing to give women choice as to abortion. President Trump accused Biden of being willing to kill babies even after 9 months of term. They were throwing arguments back and forth with abandon. President Trump failed to explain that the Supreme Court has ruled that this is a state rights issue. The 10th Amendment of the Constitution says that if rights are not specifically granted to the federal government in the Constitution, they revert to the states or the people respectively. The Supreme Court, in my opinion, ruled correctly to say that the abortion issue must go back to the states and each individual state should decide the abortion rule. Trump tried to explain that he was supportive of that. He tried to explain that most jurists are supportive of that, but he did a bad job of getting that point across to the American people. This is still a very, very controversial issue, and I don't think the American people yet understand that the Supreme Court has said you will decide this, you the people will decide this in each of your states according to your own wishes. And this is a major issue for us to think about in terms of our vote for president and in terms of our vote in our states. Another issue that did not get a full hearing in the debate, in my opinion, was the issue of our foreign affairs and particularly our involvement in the Mideast and our involvement in the Ukraine. President Biden made the appropriate comment that if we don't defend ourselves against Russian aggression in the Ukraine, it's only a matter of time before Russia will move on Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. And I think he's right about that. And all of those countries are members of the NATO alliance. And if Russia moves on those countries, the NATO alliance will invoke Article 5, and we, America, will be in a European war with the Russians. So it makes sense for us to defeat Russia now. Former President Trump didn't deny this issue, but he also didn't make a strong enough point that we, America, are not doing enough to defeat Putin. In fact, he decried the huge amount of money that we're spending on the war in the Ukraine. President Biden responded to that by saying, hey, it's not so much money we're giving to the Ukrainians as it is weapons that we make here in the United States. I agree with that. I think on this point, Biden clearly has the more logical foreign policy position, the more logical position for the United States. And I think he scored significant points. I'm not sure that the public really heard that, but I believe that we do have a real strategic need to help the Ukrainians, and we need to defeat the Russians, not just delay the inevitable and let this war drag on. We need to give them, the Ukrainians, much more help and win the war. As to the Iranians, this hardly came up at all in the course of the debate. And yet we know the Iranians are attacking us through their proxies everywhere, over and over and over again. Neither candidate talked about responding to the Iranians with force, as Reagan did to end the hostage crisis when he first came into office. And I was very disappointed that both candidates failed to deal with the issues associated with Iran. Hamas and Hezbollah did come up. They are financed by Iran. We need to support Israel and defeat Hamas once and for all, and defeat Hezbollah once and for all, and defeat the Houthis that are attacking shipping in the Red Sea once and for all. But the head of the snake is Iran. We defeat Iran, or at least cut off the head by sinking their navy, downing their air force, destroying their nuclear development capabilities, and destroying all their heavy weapons, leaving them at the mercy of their population that will likely rise up against them. We don't have to land troops on the ground. We destroy their military on the ground with our superior air force, our superior missiles, and leave them fighting to save their own lives from their own people. That way, we cut off supplies to Hezbollah, we cut off supplies to Hamas, support Israel, we cut off supplies to the Houthis, and the Mideast becomes a much, much safer place. So the foreign policy challenges, particularly of a military nature, were not really discussed in detail in the debate. I was disappointed that the commentators did not make more of this, and that the candidates did not speak more forcefully about what we can do to make the world a safer place, not just for America, but for everyone. And we have the power to do it, but power unused is power wasted. We might as well not have the power if we're not willing to use it. This administration does not appear to be willing to use the power, and I'm not sure former President Trump is willing to use the power. When asked how he would end the war in the Ukraine, he said, well, I'll end it in the first 24 hours. But he doesn't say how. That's a major question for us, and it concerns me very, very much. They ended with concluding remarks. Trump's concluding remarks, they were not particularly compelling, but they were dramatically better than Biden's remarks that were rambling, weak, hard to understand. And I got the impression that Mr. Biden was just worn out, which again comes back to the very first point we made. Can he withstand the rigors of the White House for 4 years? Will we have a president for 4 years? Or will somebody invoke the 25th Amendment and say he is not capable of conducting the affairs of the office? These are my thoughts. I encourage you to consider these as you reflect on the debates, as you analyze. Use your common sense to analyze what you heard and what you did not hear. Make it your business to make a very informed vote for the President of the United States. And I wish all of you the very best. God bless you, and God bless America.